understand there's a lot of people would like that to stop, then why aren't the state parks partially being funded from that drilling tax? It seems to make sense to me.
Well, I want to ask you more broadly about funding for parks and forests. Do we need to increase more funding? Do we need more funding?
Yes, actually, I was up on the steps of the state capitol, and I was lobbying, oh, thank you. I was lobbying for these state parks a couple of years ago. My family and I went up, and we had a really nice time where we lobbied for state parks, because we have Swatara State Park, Memorial Lake State Park in Lebanon County, and Swatara State Park has not been completed. They say there's no funding. I'd like to see that park done. It was part of Project 70 under Maurice Goddard, former DEP secretary. So he wanted a park within 25 miles of every citizen, and ours is still not done, but our land was condemned. The land taken off the tax rolls, and our people are picking up the tab all this time.
Thanks, Myers.
I think one of the greatest avenues for preservation is to get the public behind what it is you're wanting to preserve. I think one of the things that we need to be investing in here in Pennsylvania is actually the tourism when it comes to advancing our parks. Our people really aren't aware of our parks, aren't encouraged to use our parks because there's never really any encouragement from the system for people to use them. Once you begin using them and embracing them, then you begin to value them. If it's just something you drive by, you don't value it. So it begins by getting people on board. And once you get people on board, we can make sure that the funding is increased. And then, since I'm a team player and really am not about trying to drive personal agendas without having teams around me, how much we would fund these preservation efforts in our state parks would have a lot to do with what we're going to get handed to us once we take it over from the corporate administration.
Thank you. John Hanger.
Well, there's two ways that I would, in fact, fund state parks. First is the revenues that the state parks themselves generate should no longer be rated by the corporate administration and put into the general fund. It should be dedicated to the state forests and state parks. And we've seen the opposite with this administration. The second is that it's time for a Growing Greener 3 program. Governor Ridge actually had the first, and Governor Rendell had the second. Of course, Governor Corbett, who does not accept sustainability as a core value, has not had a Growing Greener program. I proposed a $725 million a year, $725 million Growing Greener program, $100 million a year for 7 years. I believe I'm the only candidate tonight with a Growing Greener program. It's at hangerforgovernor.com.
Tom Wolf.
I think John Muir said that if we want people to appreciate something, we ought to get them to visit it. And our state parks, if we really want preservation to survive and thrive in Pennsylvania, we really need to support those state parks. So any money that we generate from our state parks ought to be devoted to supporting and sustaining and preserving those state parks, that open space. And in addition to that, we ought to do everything we can to support Growing Greener 2 and look at the reverse of preserving our open spaces, and that is make sure that we're doing a good job revitalizing our urban and densely populated communities.
Ed Pawlowski.
I would agree with what everyone has said so far, but I take it a little step further. I think one of the things we need to do is take that Marcellus Shale tax and put it back into conserving some of our land, making sure we properly fund our state parks, making sure we properly fund the DEP, making sure we properly have regulators at the PUC. I also think we need to look at these massive subsidies that we're giving to fossil fuels. $2.9 billion a year goes into subsidizing fossil fuels. We need to look at it, reevaluate them, see if it warrants it, and make sure that we're funding our parks first before we're funding subsidies to big gas and oil.
Katie McGinty.
Thanks very much. I think this issue, more than just about any other, underscores why you have to have a severance tax instead of the impact fee. The impact fee is not going to the broad-based needs of the Commonwealth, of which our state parks and forests need to be top of the agenda. When I was Secretary of Environmental Protection, I was very proud to have been the point of the spear in fighting for Growing Greener 2. And we fought long and hard, but the upshot of that was we went to ballot initiative, the public overwhelmingly supported it, and at the end of the day, with, by the way, Mike DeBernardinas's help and leadership, Pennsylvania became the #1 state in the nation in the preservation of open space and parks, and we had more such acreage added to the public trust than any state east of the Mississippi. That's a legacy, and by the way, it's great for our economy as well as our environment. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob McCord.
First, I agree absolutely that we need a driller's tax. It's appropriate and earmarked for this. We need to recycle funds from the parks for the parks. But I also want to open the aperture a little and remind people, as the Invest and Innovate Governor, I will take on Tom Corbett and point out that he has this silly rhetoric about a spend number without any respect whatsoever for the return on public investments. We get $7 back for every $1 we invest in open space and state parks and so forth. $7 for every $1 we invest. We already have 219,000 jobs driven by this, more than $20 billion industry. The reason to do this is it's a great investment. It's a clean investment. It will help to attract more businesses and clean businesses. It's something we must do, and we must go after all the appropriate revenue streams and plug loopholes, like the Delaware loophole, like the sales tax loophole, like the tobacco loophole, to find the revenues to make these kinds of investments. Thanks.
Allyson Schwartz.
We could pay for parks if your committee would tax Wall Street trade.
Please don't interrupt.
I just said,
Thank you, Allyson Schwartz.
I mean, this is just such another example of Governor Corbett really failing our state. Everyone can take pictures, he has beautiful pictures on his website, and in fact, he has neglected to fund our state parks and our state forests. And so certainly I would also say we should invest. They're important spaces. They mean a lot to all of us. And I would echo the fact that the public is there. The public has voted to support the Key 93, Growing Greener 1 and 2. I was in the state senate for both. As governor, I would certainly do a Growing Greener 3 and advocate not only for the public green spaces in very many of our rural areas, but I would also point out that there's great green space right here in Philadelphia that also needs to be attended to, and additional spaces that we can and should invest in to make sure that we're sustainable communities, greener communities, healthier, cleaner communities everywhere across Pennsylvania.
I should mention that Governor Corbett, of course, was invited to attend this evening. He was